Well, hello, shiny, crafty people. Tim Totten here, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to show you a really interesting project made with a pre-made quilt, a quilt I bought at Walmart. You may have seen our series before where I did a placemat, and I'm going to show you a new version of a placemat that doesn't require any of the pesky binding. See, I found a video online, and I'm going to show it in the description below, so there'll be a link to it. And this video by another maker showed an interesting technique that I have adapted in my own way and took a couple steps out to make it easier to be able to do. This is a pot holder with this interesting border where none of this is binding. You don't have to fold over and stitch that. So let's talk about what we need for this. Specifically, we're gonna need some strips here of a coordinating fabric that will go with our pre-made quilt fabric. And I chose this dark blue because it has some dark blue in it. And then I need a couple strips of that are at least as long as the entire border of what that's gonna be. I was making this placemat at 14 by 19, so I'm gonna need a piece of this fabric with whatever design centered in the middle at 14 by 19 plus 2 inches on each side, on each direction, so 16 by 21. And then I'll need some strips here, a couple of 21-inch strips and a couple 16-inch strips, so 2 of each. And basically that's it. Let's go over to the cutting table and I will show you how we cut out our piece of fabric by centering in the middle. So here we are at the cutting table, and you'll notice that I have my material laid out, and I'm gonna make sure that the way to get this sized right, I want this medallion in the center. It just happens to be the quilt that I bought. And what I've done is I've taken my ruler, and I know that I need 16 inches wide. So I've taken the 8-inch line on my ruler and run it right down the middle of that design. And then I know I want this to be 21 inches. So I put the 10.5-inch mark right at the middle as well. So I have my 8 and my 10.5-inch mark running right through the middle, and this will make it exactly square. So I'm just gonna cut along each of these 3 sides here, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. Now I've gotten 4 or 5, maybe even 6 projects out of this, including a tennis bag. So if you didn't see that video yet, you should definitely check it out. That one's so interesting. Make sure all of my pieces cut here. I did a toaster cover. I did this, what I already showed you for the placemat, and now I'm doing another placemat design, and I've done several other things. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm gonna keep finding more because I still have plenty of quilt left. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this back around and put the 8-inch mark right through the middle once again, and find the 10.5-inch mark on my ruler. In fact, what's funny is I might have to trim that edge on the top down because I didn't actually stop at the 21-inch mark. So let me make sure I have this accurate, and then cut out the rest of it. And then I'll have to shorten it a little bit along this edge. You can also mark this out with a pen or something, or a piece of chalk, and then cut it out with a pair of scissors if you feel more comfortable. I've already practiced this task once before, so I feel pretty confident with what we're doing. All right, so I know that I already have it at 16 inches wide, but I've gone a little too far to 21. So I'll take my ruler and put my ruler at 21 along the edge here, and then that will let me cut this in the proper measurement. Once we have this part done, it's really just a matter of sewing those strips on and folding it. So what we're gonna do next is we wanna measure off, I've gotta do some markings on here real quick in the way. What I have to do is I have to cut off these corners so that it will fold. Because this thing is gonna fold, and in fact, this just continues around the front. So I have to cut these angles in for the corners. And for me to do that, I need to get a proper measurement on the corners. So I want this thing to fold over 1 inch on each side, which means I need to fold 1 inch, but I don't just measure 1 inch and cut. I have to actually go through 1 inch with the 1/4 inch, with a 45-degree angle. So I'm gonna get a 45-degree square to do that with, and something to mark with. All right, so I know that I need to come down. I'm gonna show you a little easier here. I need to mark this 1 inch and 1 inch in. So I'll put an inch mark there and an inch mark here. I know I need to come in that amount. And I need to come across that and cut it so these fold over. So one of the ways you can do that is you can put your ruler on with the 45-degree line matching, and you can come across and put the mark. And that's what we'll chop off. We'll chop all of that off. Now, if you do some math and you want to do like the Pythagorean theorem, you can figure out that you need this to be 1 inch. So if you did one triangle, it would be 1 inch times 1 inch. It's a bit crazy to figure out. So it's easier just to do it in this direction. So now what I know is I need to basically, when I want to cut off, I need to put the corner at 1.5 inches. So I will do that all around. Put that one. Here we'll also put it at 1.5. So I'll put my angle across and bring the 1.5 inch mark into the point. So I know there's a 45-degree angle. And then I can just cut off there too. And I'll do all 4 of them that way. One of the things I really like about this technique when I saw it was that it requires no flipping and folding of binding. The only thing you have to flip and fold are those strips that I cut. I cut strips at 1.5 inches, and then I folded them in half. So they're now 3/4 inch strips, but they're doubled over. So they have a nice finished edge already. That helps. So that's sort of like making binding, but I don't have to fold it over the edge. All right, we're gonna go back over to the sewing machine and I'll show you what we put these on. Now I want this to be the center. So I'm gonna put my strips on so that this folds like this when it's done, all around the edges, and gives us that same look as our sample piece, which has disappeared and I can't show it to you, but you'll understand when we, oh, it's right here. See, we wanted to create that. So what's gonna happen is when I sew these together, they're gonna bring the corners in this way, just like on this one. And the strips we add will be the extra detail. Let's go to the sewing machine. Now remember, I'm putting the strips on the top here, on this part here. And I need to go a little past, in fact, I'd like to start sort of in line with the other. And I put them right up to the edge, and then I'm gonna use just a 1/4 inch stitch to stitch these down. Now, the nice clean edge is here, and the 2 raw edges are on this side, see? The 2 raw edges. So this allows us to finish this edge up, and I don't have to do anything to make it look any better. It's what's great about it. It's gonna be done already. I'm just gonna fold this up to get it a little out of the way. Now, if you wanna use a guide with your machine, please do that. That's a really good idea. I'm so used to doing 1/4 inch seams, I'm not worried about it. And then I'm gonna go off a little, and then I'll just trim this about even with the other. It doesn't really matter that much because frankly, this extra material is gonna be hidden inside. And then look what happens when we fold that open. And I realized I just did this the wrong way. I need to do it on the other side. So I'm gonna rip this seam out here. Let me get my seam ripper and actually take it out. I needed to do it on the other side, and that's exactly what I got wrong. And so, you know what's funny? When I make these videos, I always tell people, well, I'm gonna leave in the mistakes. And people sometimes say to me, do you make those mistakes on purpose? And I gotta tell you something, I don't. I really don't. I don't like making mistakes if I can help it, but it happens sometimes. You know what? It's easy to fix. So I took all that out, and I will flip this over, and I will start again. You have to put it on the opposite side of what you're doing, because that's what's gonna fold over. So let's do it again. Like I said, we'll do that again. Okay, so we do it on the opposite side. I left a tail, like I said. 1/4 inch seam. Now be careful you don't stretch out this strip of fabric. I didn't cut it on the bias, but because it's so thin fabric, it's not thin, but it's so skinny of a piece, it's wanting to stretch a little bit, and I really don't want that to stretch, so I'll go through and make sure that looked pretty good. We'll trim it off. All right, we'll do the other side the same way, and then the other two pieces as well. I'm gonna reuse the piece that I had cut off because it wasn't quite the right size. There we go. Yeah, we need it because we need that size. I may have to cut another piece. I may have messed this up enough that I need another piece. It doesn't hurt to have a few extras. And all of this shaggy thread here, no problem. Don't worry about them. It's not going to cause a problem at all. It's all going to be hidden underneath. Folded inside and it will disappear. Okay, so that one's done. See how nice that's going to look. And then we do the two sides. Now, it'll be interesting to see, do I have enough to go down? Oh, I do. I'll get exactly enough. So let me just chop these in half. This one in half. There we go. I was so excited when I saw this technique because I really don't like binding, especially small, tiny things like either placemats or like a small pot holder like this. So it's really nice to find a technique that'll work better than that. And I'm not even going to trim this other tail at the end because I am going to trim them before they all get flipped and folded. So I'm just going to leave that at that length. It's not a problem. So that went all the way down the edge there. And we'll do our last one. The next thing we do after this is we go to the iron and iron this all flat so it'll look nice when it's time to flip it. Because there's really, after I do that and iron it, there's only 2 steps left. It's so easy. Now you don't have to pick this skinny little border that I did. You could decide to do a bigger border than this. You might say, oh, well, I'd rather have a border that's like, you know, an inch wide rather than this, what's going to end up basically being a 1/2 inch skinny blue border with about a 1 inch of this teal border. So you can go higher if you want to. Let's go to the iron. So we're here at the iron and I'm basically going to go in and just iron all of these flat and open. Just iron away. The nice part is that the pre-made quilt is much thicker than this other fabric, right? So the pre-made quilt is actually, doesn't want to buckle underneath, so the fabric automatically just opens up to the right way. So all down. Now the only thing you want to do is make sure it doesn't twist too weird on the corners here where they stopped sewing them together. So just make sure it doesn't twist out of alignment. I'm just peeling little pieces of thread as I go along that are annoying me, taking them out of there. I don't have to do it later. So you just want to make sure it really opens that seam. And you want to keep it somewhat straight. So you want to watch it and make sure it's going pretty much straight. There. You don't want to warp it too much. Oh wow, that looks so good. Okay, so if you wanted to right now, you could come in and trim these a bit smaller, but I'm not as worried about that. What our next step is going to be is to get these corners to fold together, just like this. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that we line up our intersections, where the blue comes to this lighter color. We want to make sure we line those up. That's more important even than lining up this outer edge, and that's because we want to make sure that they're going to properly line up when we stitch them together. So you can put a pin into that if you choose to. I'm going to get some pins. So I'm going to come in and just pin that accurately. Well, you know what? I'm going to pin from this side because I need to be able to take it out. And I'll just pin all 4 of those. And again, just lay them open. You'll trim all these tabs off when we get close to the actual, after we sew these together, these edges together. So I'll make sure I get that as close as I can to being lined up. Now I'm pinning from the outside in because I'll have to pull that, and I'm probably gonna stitch from this side. So I wanna be able to, I'm gonna stitch down, I wanna be able to pull that pin out. And I'm gonna do all 4 of those. Now it may seem weird because you're like, well, that's the front side and you're folding these together on the back side. Well, that's because they will then flip over. That's the secret of this technique. So again, I lay these two together, get them to push together the right way. Now, ideally, they will also really line up well on the outer edge too. These two edges will line up because you've hopefully measured correctly. Again, we're folding this line we cut, that 45-degree angle over, and putting it here. Now, I'm actually shooting this video in real time. So other than the intro and the exit, this is about how long it might take to make one of these your first time, right? All right, let's go back over to the sewing machine. So you'll see that I have these now folded over, right? That stitch is there, or that pin is in there. And I'm just gonna fold along, or sew right along that line at 1/4 of an inch, making sure I take my pin out and just continue that same stitching off the end. Continue it off the end. And that should have trimmed itself, but it didn't. And then we can just cut off some of the excess of this material. I don't want to cut off too much because when I fold this inside, I want it to more easily hold on the inside. And I think I ran out of bobbin in here, or something happened with my bobbin. Yeah, it peeled off, so I'm going to replace and fix that. And I'm going to add the stitch back to the end because it didn't do all the right stitches at the end. I'll show you what I mean. It started to come apart when I started to do that, and I realized something was wrong. So I've done that. So when I fold this inside, I want those tails to flatten out and be caught when I stitch it. All right, so that's one finished. And I'll just continue and do the rest of these, the other 4 that are here to be done, or other three. Again, pull the pin out. I'm back stitching really closely here because I'm gonna have to turn this and I don't want it to cause a problem when I turn it. I'm getting so close. Literally the last thing that we'll do is just top stitch the whole thing once these 4 stitches get done. So I'm I'm like so excited, looking forward to that, because it looks so good when it finishes. This is one of those things that looks super complicated, like you spent a lot of time and energy to do, and it really is so much easier than that. Get all this stuff out of the way, I'll clean it up later. Just keep trimming those little pieces off. And like I said, I don't want to trim them too far off because I still want to have a little bit of that tail to get caught underneath. All right, so let's go in a different location. I'll show you how to do these, flip this whole thing inside out. All right, here we are. I'm actually gonna put this under the foot. Okay, great. So we've done that. We've done that stitching, and oh, this doesn't look as exciting, does it? Well, it's okay, because we're not done yet. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to flip each one of these corners in, and you can use some kind of something to push the corners out. Don't use anything sharp. So don't use this is a really nice seam ripper I have. Don't use the point of the seam ripper. But if you have a blunt end of a seam ripper, you could do that, or a knitting needle that's not real sharp, a really big blunt one. Or there are turners designed exactly for this. So that's one of them. You see how it starts to turn around. Then we flip the other one in. Now it really starts to get a look. You can start to see it coming together. And then we'll do the last 2. Find something again. You could use a chopstick, actually works really well. I was surprised when I found out how well chopsticks worked. And the last one comes out. Don't use the end of your scissors either. I've seen people do that and I think, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And I'm gonna flatten these out inside like I told you. See, open those inside so they flatten out. And now our goal is to go back to our iron and iron this flat. Let's go do that. All right, so here we are at the iron. And if you wanted to, you could put a straight edge inside, like maybe a piece of cardboard to fold it over. But I kind of like the way that this, I think my eye is just as good as any other thing. And I'm basically just going in and making sure that I look at it, flatten it out. It'll flatten out naturally. It wants to flatten out. You just have to make sure you're not pulling in too much material. You know, you want to make sure it's still got the 1 inch sort of seam. Really 1.5, because this is the blue here's a half and the other is 1 inch. So The corners will straighten itself out. And if you need to put a measuring tool on this to make sure it's accurate, you're welcome to. I think it would look good if you did that. And the last edge here. Now, the major technique that I saw before in the video that I linked in the description showed doing this with regular fabric and then tucking a piece of this material inside. But I figure if I just made it with the material, it works automatically. Now our next step is going to be to sew all the way around, and I'm just going to put a few pins in to hold the middle points where they need to be, because I'm a little worried about, as I stitch around it, it sort of pushing or doing some waviness to it. You could put more than these 4 pins if you wanted. The other thing is you could use a walking foot when you're machine, because you're going to be going over several layers now with all the batting in there. But that's what we're going to stitch. Let's go back to the machine. Now you might want a matching thread. I'm using black, but it's going onto this navy fabric, and I'm really not going to see it. I'm going to start in a corner here. I just think this is easy, and I'm just going to edge stitch. Remember, I'm trying to collect everything inside. I'm just doing an edge stitch because I think that looks really quite professional. I will pull a couple threads out of here or shove them back underneath, because then they're going to disappear. Once it's stitched closed, you're not going to be able to do anything to it. None of that will come out, pushing you off the table there. Hit the corner. I use my needle down on my machine. I have that ability to leave the needle in the down position. So nice. If you're shopping for a new sewing machine and it's in your budget to get a machine that has the needle down and needle up feature, definitely I would say go for it. I think it's worth it. I think it is as valuable as an automatic cutter, which my machine also has. It's as valuable, or maybe more valuable, for this kind of sewing. I've gotten very spoiled by not having to go and trim threads and pull the stuff out of the machine. I mean, you do get spoiled by that. And again, I'm just edge stitching all the way. And in fact, if you were making a set of these, you could so easily just get every one of them to this point and then do all this at the same time on like all of them, if you're doing 4, 6, or 8 of these as a gift to somebody. So this is taking me about 25 minutes to do as a tutorial, but I have to tell you, if you were doing this on your own, you might be able to go a little bit faster. Let's actually show you what this looks like fully out. All right, so shiny crafty people, that was the tutorial to make a placemat with this really great detail. Oh my gosh, it's such a good detail. I love it so much. And it doesn't look much different. Actually, I think it looks better than the original one I did that had this binding on the edge, because this just looks more professional, more attractive, and you can really do more in terms of highlighting certain colors or using different fabrics. And so, hey, why don't you try to make one of these today? Maybe a good Christmas gift for somebody, or a gift for a housewarming. Either way, I hope you try it out, and until next time, stay crafty. Bye for now. All right, so now I've got to make a bunch more, because I had all these on my table, but I really want these.